Borderlands 4 is an absolute abomination when it comes to performance on the PC. You know, when devs and publishers actually take the time to address concerns and feedback to their player base, that's genuinely a good sight, but the main objective should be to release the game in a state where performance is adequate right out of the gate. Now, Gearbox's CEO, Randy Pitchford, addressed players, but not in the way you'd expect them to. If you find yourself in this situation, like we're seeing with Borderlands 4, all you have to do is just say, hey, we're working on it, we hear you guys, and we'll come out with an update. But we appreciate your patience, we're working on it. But instead, he resorts to gaslighting players, calling people idiots, and basically saying, you shouldn't be poor. What, you don't have a 5090 and you're not playing with X4 frame generation? What's wrong with you? What a mess. Let's get into that in this video. Hey, if you enjoy content like this, drop a like, make sure to subscribe, and smash that bell so you never miss another video. Hey, what is going on, guys? Danny here. Welcome back to the channel, and I hope you've all been doing well. I wanted to make this video because there's just been so much noise surrounding Borderlands 4 in not just the PC gaming community, but also the gaming community in general. It just seems like the performance surrounding this game and optimization has been a complete mess on all platforms. And I'm sure you guys are aware of what's been going on, and you probably have experienced the issues and poor optimization firsthand yourself. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't played any of the Borderlands. I know. It's on the backlog, guys. I actually recently got an MSI clause, so that'll help clear those backlog games out. But going back to the topic on hand, I did actually end up getting Borderlands 4, so, I could do some of my own testing with it, because you guys know me. If I'm always advocating, if you can test the hardware or the software for yourself, then that's generally the best way to go about it and, attain a first-hand experience. But I have also talked to, other creators and hardware testers, all of whom have said that the game runs like absolute cheeks. Even on a RTX 5090, which is the fastest gaming GPU on the planet and retails for $2,000 plus.
So this is native 4K on the very high preset. And as you can see, we are struggling to even hit 60 FPS with our 1% lows sitting around 45 to 46 FPS. The performance here is truly absolutely awful.
Performance dumpster fire. I'm playing Borderlands 4 on an RTX 4090 with a Ryzen 7 9800X 3D. That is not mid-range hardware. It's absolutely not top of the line either, but it's strong enough that I almost never run into any performance issues that I can't solve by just brute forcing it. Yet here I am, even on high settings, I'm stuck relying on DLSS performance, upscaling, and frame gen just to be able to hit something close to stable.
I'll be showing you guys some of my own test footage later on, but before we really dive into this whole fiasco, I wanted to show you guys this gameplay footage of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. This was an open world RPG game that was released earlier this year, and it's definitely going to be a Game of the Year candidate. I have no doubts about that. Well, you might be asking, why is it? Well, apart from actually being a kick-ass game with a really good story, the devs did a remarkable job with optimizing it. As you guys can see from the footage, I'm running on an RTX 5080 and 14900K with DDR5 8000, playing at 4K native with a mixture of experimental and ultra settings. Experimental is one notch beyond ultra, so we're really cranking up the settings here. And it looks absolutely beautiful, and as I'm walking around in Kuttenberg, performance is very smooth and consistent. Just take a look at those lows. And this is one of the busiest areas in the game, where you have lots of structures, NPCs roaming around, going about their day, and doing their daily tasks. This right here is a prime example, a golden example of good optimization. And granted, I am running, some pretty high-end hardware, but if you've been following me, you have seen some of my older videos where I've done revisits of older hardware or lower hardware, and even on something like a 5060 Ti at 1440p, this game runs very well on ultra settings. But let's move on, and what you're looking at here is Cyberpunk 2077 at 4K native with path tracing and ultra settings. Yes, the performance is much lower, but understandably so, because real-time path tracing is just very computationally heavy on the GPU, but that results in a very detailed environment, and also the world is just so much more dense, as you have NPCs, cars everywhere, and buildings with lots of reflections on them. There's a lot going on, and when you look at the performance, you understand why, and then it becomes acceptable to utilize something like DLSS upscaling and even frame generation to an extent, as that is a trade-off you have to make for very high visual fidelity like this. And the reason why I'm showing you guys these examples is because, at least with those games, you're being offered very high levels of visual fidelity. However, when you look at a game like Borderlands 4, which, uses that cartoonish, cel-shaded style of graphics that you would see on, I don't know, Fortnite or the Breath of the Wild from the Switch, it really doesn't make much sense for this game to be running the way it does. It's the same criticism I had with something like Monster Hunter Wilds. And look, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this graphics art style is ugly or anything. It can surely look beautiful. I think Breath of the Wilds is one of the best visually looking games I've seen, but they're not like that photorealistic visual fidelity environment that we've seen from like other games. So it shouldn't be running worse than games that are actually pushing the graphics boundary. Like when I saw something like Black Myth Wukong, which was released in 2024 summer, I was like, yeah, this is a game that actually feels like it's pushing graphics to a whole nother level and really bringing us closer to the real life looking environments. And you understand then at that point why performance is so demanding from the hardware perspective. But Borderlands 4 is not providing those visuals. It's not really pushing any sort of visual envelope there at all. In fact, even looking at it from a gameplay perspective or like an environmental perspective, it's really not doing anything special that we haven't seen other games do beyond that. So, I don't know, the performance is really not justified. And one of Randy's tweets was just so retarded and out of touch. And don't worry, we're going to talk more about his tweets later on. But one of the things he stated was, I know a lot of you guys are dead set on playing at 4K with ultra max settings and using 2 or 3-year-old hardware. You do you, but Borderlands 4 and Unreal Engine 5 are doing a lot, and for me, that trade-off for frames isn't worth it. Oh my god, man. Okay, look, I have recently done GPU revisits, and I recently made a video talking about how gamers need to lay off their obsession with max or ultra settings. I get that. And yeah, he is right. Folks with older hardware do need to sometimes temper their expectations when it comes to playing a newer modern game. I've seen a lot of times where a new game comes out, and you have someone who's on something like a GTX 1080, a graphics card which was released nearly a decade ago, and then they're wondering why I can't max out this game at 1440p. I've seen it, and it gets kind of annoying. However, in this case, this whole entire argument completely falls apart when your game looks like it's something out of 2014 or 2015. Like I said, it's not bad visuals, but they're also nothing that we haven't seen before from older titles. And we're going to circle back to this, but just for the sake of being able to offer my own, genuine input on this, I did test the game out on my test bench with the same hardware you guys saw from those previous examples. In the beginning section of the game, I was playing at 1440p native with a very high preset, and in this area, I was able to attain around, 70 FPS average with 58 on the 1% lows. Now, to be fair, I've power tuned my 14900K and we're using DDR5 8000, so that's definitely helping. And they did also release a patch or two from what I know after the game was initially launched. And while I never got to test the game before any sort of day one patches, as some other creators did, they said that, one of the recent patches did help with stuttering, and I am seeing that here. It looks like performance is fairly consistent for the most part. With that said, the level of performance is not impressive. This is an overclocked RTX 5080, and the best we're able to achieve is just 70-ish FPS with 2015 graphics. Come on, man. At least I was expecting to see like 150 plus FPS with these settings. Then, as I progressed further, I ended up bumping up the resolution to 4K to see, what the performance would be like. And as you guys can see from the footage, we're getting around 35 FPS average. And while I'll comment that the performance, again, is consistent with respect to the minimums, the overall is just too low. Like, what justifies this low performance visually? Because I just don't see it. When we look at something like Cyberpunk with path tracing and we're getting like 40 to 45 FPS average, that makes sense to me. But here, with this comic book type of art style or cel-shaded art style, it's coming nowhere close to that level of visual fidelity, yet performance is actually worse. And this goes back to what I said about Randy's argument. You're shitting on people who have, 30 series GPUs that, fine, yeah, they're 5 years old at this point, but you're talking as if your game is some next level revolutionary jump but doesn't even look better than open world games from 5+ years ago. It's just embarrassing. So, when I got to the open world section of the game, I decided to bump the preset to the badass preset, which is the highest that this game has to offer. And at 4K, I also turned on DLSS in quality mode to see what would happen. I personally don't see really any issues with utilizing upscaling, especially in quality mode, especially with the new transformer model. I think, it can look just as good, if not even better than native in some scenarios. But with these conditions, even though we went up a notch in graphics preset, we actually see a performance bump due to DLSS helping with the lower internal resolution that's being upscaled. But even so, we're still struggling to hit 60 FPS average. And this is a high-end GPU that came out earlier this year, and we've got it pretty heavily overclocked. So it's not like this is a 5+-year-old GPU, Randy. This is a GPU that came out this year, and it's one of the higher-end GPUs that goes for $1,000 plus. So that argument just does not work. But according to Randy, in order to attain a smooth experience, you need to use DLSS. He says that, use DLSS, it's great. The game was built to take advantage of it. This is not a competitive FPS, and I have been led to believe that in a blind test, that humans cannot detect any input lag. In my own demonstrations and experiments, I believe this is true. And this tweet actually tells me a lot. It basically tells me that during the game's developmental cycle, they basically told developers, don't worry about optimizing the game. We're just going to implement DLSS and upscaling technologies along with frame generation to tell players to use that in order to attain playable in a playable experience. The problem here is that this guy has actually not tested the hardware for himself clearly, and he talks about humans can't detect any input lag, which is just complete and utter bullshit. He further goes on to post a video from another creator who made a quote-unquote optimization guide, and he talks about his big tip, which is just turn on frame generation, and my FPS went from 60 to 160 FPS.
A lot of settings that you can turn on. I personally, in terms of my graphics and stuff, played with DLSS on performance with frame gen on. That bumped my frame rates from 70 to about 160 FPS, turning on both DLSS and frame gen.
And the problem is that they're treating this as some sort of genuine performance booster or performance boosting technology when it's clearly not that. All it is a frame smoothing technology. And then on top of that, the latency penalty is there. It can certainly be felt, especially when you are dealing with lower base frame rates that this game is running on. So, the next thing I did turn on was X4 frame generation just to see, how things would go. Because according to Randy, that's how you should be playing. And while the FPS does skyrocket to around, 160 or 180 FPS at 4K, it doesn't feel that good. It doesn't really feel as good as the FPS is implying. The lag is definitely noticeable, and there is quite a bit of noticeable blur. And yeah, he's right that, this isn't a competitive shooter. And again, with this, it is, sure, playable, but why should the consumer be settling for this? As he also stated, Borderlands 4 is a premium game made for premium gamers. So I guess that's what he meant to say. But sorry, man, my premium dollars are going to be spent on actual premium games. Stuff that's pretty well optimized, like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Expedition 33. Those are premium games that, deserve premium dollars. Sorry. You know what pisses me off more? It's when people are responding to him with actual factual arguments, and he completely dismisses them and just resorts to attacks, like as if the person doesn't know what they're talking about. And in one of the responses, it honestly sounds like he's just using an AI chatbot to get help. One of the 5080 owners asks, Dear Randy, if a 5080 has to activate certain settings in order to get proper FPS, well, then you should probably be worrying about your optimization. And then he responds with, we are confident in the automatic settings chosen for a typical specification with a 5080 GTX. 5080 GTX. If you want to adjust further for FPS, some of the settings I recommend can help you to do that. Use the Auto Detect Graphics preset button in the Advanced menu to see if it changes anything from default for your PC. He's even told players that they should just go and code their own engine if they're not satisfied. And this is your classic, appeal to accomplishment argument, which just comes off as so dismissive because imagine you went to a restaurant, you order a nice steak, and you tell them that, I just want a medium rare steak. And then what you end up getting is a complete and total trash burnt brick. And then when you complain to the chef, He comes out and says, well, I'm a 5-star chef and you're not. Therefore, you can't complain because you don't know what you're talking about. Like, no, you don't have to be a chef to know when something tastes like garbage. And you don't have to be a game developer to know when a game runs like absolute dog shit. Now, he's gone onto Twitter and he posted a lot more nonsense. And at some point, you just have to have that self-awareness that all I'm doing is just making things worse. Like I said at the start of the video, just tell people, hey, we're working on it. We hear the feedback and we'll get back to you guys. And instead, he just resorts to gaslighting players and making claims that DLSS is the ultimate performance booster, which really just highlights your incompetence as a studio manager and shows how you skipped over something really crucial in the developmental cycle. And at some point, you just have to just shut the fuck up and not make things worse than they already are. Clearly, he hasn't tested it for himself, so he should go and play the game and take that feedback well. I mean, just look at the turnaround for CD Projekt Red, what they did with Cyberpunk. And unfortunately, that can be kind of used as a double-edged sword because it also shows some developers that, we can release our games in a broken state and then fix them later on, and people will still throw money at us. But at least with them in the initial fiasco that happened with Cyberpunk, they actually responded to the feedback well, and they didn't resort to attacking people. He also referenced that people should look at the game's system recommendations chart that was posted on their site. And to be honest, this really just looks like an Nvidia ad campaign because wherever it was applicable, they state that you should be using 2 to 4x frame generation and DLSS upscaling to achieve a 60 plus FPS on graphics cards that cost, $700 plus, $1,000 plus, which is, again, just garbage. Goes back to what I was saying, how they believe they don't have to optimize their games. They can just plug in DLSS and frame gen to do all of that heavy lifting for them. And there's a lot of people out there, running hardware that can't actually even support these technologies. And, again, go into it with tempered expectations, but the game visually at least needs to be justifying it, right? Because if a 3060 Ti can play Cyberpunk on high settings at 1080p with no upscaling and attain a smooth playable experience, I don't see why this garbage has to perform with such subpar performance with a 3060 Ti at low settings at 1080p. But you know what? Lastly, I did want to end off with some gameplay. I dropped the preset to high at 4K with DLSS quality upscaling still enabled, and this gave me an acceptable experience. Like if I was really, really into the series and I really wanted to play this game, then this is how I probably would play it. And then at 1440p, which is what my monitor's native resolution is at, I was getting like 120 FPS, which is totally fine. And the game visually for its art style still looks good with these high settings. Again, like I said in a previous video, you need to just not be obsessed with maxing or setting everything to ultra. But, there is some justification for performance relative to the level of visual fidelity. But it's just a shame because, like I said, I haven't played Borderlands before, and as I was testing this for myself, I thought, hey, this is actually a pretty fun game, and I see the appeal, and I'd like to get into it. But hey, as Randy said, the game is the game. If you're not satisfied with it, please get a Steam refund. I'm sorry you don't like being told to use DLSS, but that is the way. And he's right. Consumers have the right to do whatever they want, and at the end of the day, so, hey, don't complain. The only language that these companies speak is to do with their bottom line. So that's exactly what I did. I got my refund processed right away. I'll catch you guys in the next one.
If you guys found this video to be informative and entertaining, then leave a like. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Be sure to check out the video description for cool links and ways to support the channel, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. And if you're interested in seeing more content like this, then consider subscribing. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.